April 5th. April 5th, a day closer to the NFL draft. It's crazy, man. Time is absolutely flying by. Let this
Is.
breathe for just a second here. We're getting those green check marks. Boom, boom, boom,
I think we
boom,
got
boom.
everything.
And
Yep.
we are off and running. What's up, Broncos country? It's a Wednesday night, which means it's time for your edition of Mile High Insiders, presented to you by Mile High Huddle. With me, as always, Thomas Hall. I'm Luke Patterson. Tom, we've got a jam-packed show dedicated to all things John Elway, number 7, what he's meant to the Denver Broncos, what he will mean to the Denver Broncos moving forward. And like we were talking about before the show, man, I can't wait to get into this. This is John Elway we're talking about here. It's like they might as well just change this to the John Elway show for the next hour because that's all
Right.
I want to talk about.
Yeah, exactly. And for me, I've grown up. I've ever since really I started watching football in earnest. I mean, I can remember the Super Bowl from 1981 a little bit, and then after that, only a couple years after that, I became a Broncos fan, and so I've seen John Elway from start to finish now. So I'm excited to talk about it for sure.
We're talking, of course, about John Elway. In case you've been living under a rock, Broncos country, this massive news broke yesterday, and I don't know how people haven't heard about it. John Elway and the Denver Broncos are officially no more. They had an amicable breakup, if you will, in John Elway's last year of being an outside consultant. That contract ran up last month. Apparently, Mike Kliss put out a really good report on 9news.com detailing that a little bit and how John Elway ultimately went to Greg Penner. Greg Penner and John Elway amicably kind of part ways. And what does that look like moving forward? And I had to go way back into the time machine, Tom, and look at it. This will be the first time since 2011 the Denver Broncos are not heading into an NFL draft with John Elway in the front office,
Yep.
or at least in that advisory role. I get goosebumps even saying that, but this is a good thing, right? This shouldn't be looked at as a horrible thing. This shouldn't be looked at as a bad thing. I mean, 7 always has a home. For crying out loud, he built it here in
Yeah.
Broncos country.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, talking about chills, I'll tell you, I get chills every single time I watch The Drive, right? Every single time. I remember watching it on a snowy TV back in the day when it was staticky, you couldn't get great reception. I remember watching it, and every time I watch it now, man, I always get chills. It's probably it's my top 2, 3 memories of John Elway of all time. But yeah, thinking about his career and thinking about kind of the ending of an era, so to speak, both as a player and as a GM. I mean, the guy has been with the franchise for so long, and it's just strange now to kind of see that it's over.
It is strange. It almost feels and almost I don't want to say like there's been a death, right? Because John's doing well. John's doing
Yeah.
very well. He talked about it. He gave Mike some great quotes talking about this in an interview he did with Mike Kliss on what I think just last week. So I mean, this is very fresh that we're learning the Broncos and John Elway are amicably parting ways, and we're looking at this new era of what the Denver Broncos are going to be, of course, under the Walton Penner ownership, under George Payton GM, and of course, Sean Payton as head coach. So I think Broncos country is kind of getting hit with a lot of change really quickly, especially when it comes to getting used to new ownership, getting used to a GM. Is this the right guy? Did John hire his replacement and put the Broncos in a decent spot? That's debatable and remains to be unseen. And then you've got Sean Payton as a head coach right now. So, I mean, the Denver Broncos are truly being steered into a direction that they have never been before, especially without number 7.
That's true. Yeah, and I just want to grab Heath's comment here. Thank you, Heath, for coming in. I know that you say you can't stick around for the whole show, but hopefully you can watch it after. But Heath says, "Evening, Luke and Thomas. Can't be with you guys during the show, but just wanted to pop in early here and say I love your new duo. Well, we're loving it too. So thanks, Heath, and you guys
Thanks,
are doing
man.
great work. Go Mile High Huddle, Elway, and Bronco faithful. Yeah, thank you for that, Heath. Appreciate it. Appreciate you coming in, Mike. What's up, Thomas, Luke, Scott, Dylan, and Broncos country." Absolutely. So, and Todd,
Todd
we got Todd in here
Todd's
too.
in the
Thanks.
house,
Yeah.
Michaela, David, some of our favorites here in Broncos country. In Broncos country, let us know. Well, what has John Elway meant to you? Tell me a John Elway story. I'm probably going to flash it on the screen considering today is all about John Elway. It should be April 7th right now. It's April 5th. We're talking about number 7 here on MHI. He is Thomas Hall. I am Luke Patterson. Get at the mothership at Mile High Huddle on Twitter. And here's one of our guys, Michael Ronquillo, saying good morning. Well, good evening to you, Michael. A huge fan, a huge family member, a friend of ours here on MHI, always shows us support, always shows us love. Michael's out there grinding every single day, and he never misses a show. So huge Mile High salute to you, Mike. I appreciate everything you do. I know Thomas feels the same way, and it's cool to see our friends in the chat wanting to talk number 7. Again,
Right.
we're reacting to the news. The Denver Broncos and John Elway have amicably parted ways, per Broncos insider Mike Kliss. You can read all about it at milehighhuddle.com. You can also go to 9 News and read Mike's work, where we have, of course, cited it on MHH as well. But basically, John Elway's outside consulting deal, it was set to expire last month. John had a meeting with Greg Penner. It was a very positive meeting, and it was basically decided between John Elway and Greg Penner that they would amicably part ways. And we're starting to get just a little bit of information out on what that looks like, what it means. We will get that to you guys here shortly. Let's get to Sue real quick. Sue with a very generous $4.99 super saying, hi, Luke, Scott, and Thomas. I love John Elway, but he couldn't find a quarterback to save his life. Hashtag Denver Broncos for life. Hashtag Buckham. Sue, thank you so much. Sue, you're right. A hell of a quarterback. Wasn't exactly known for finding a quarterback, but then again, Sue, the Denver Broncos aren't known for finding a quarterback either. Thomas, as you well know, John Elway was not drafted by the Denver Broncos in the 1983 NFL draft. He was drafted, of course, by the then Baltimore Colts, who dealt that John Elway huge blockbuster move over to Denver and really kicked off what would become a Pro Football Hall of Fame career.
Yeah. And speaking of which, I just want to plug the Friday show, doing the
Please.
Mile High Legend. I'm bringing back the kind of the story about how he actually was traded. So tune into that on Friday morning. It's going to be fun. I'm going to bring it back.
So you don't want me to get too far into it today?
Oh, do it.
No,
But
everybody.
this. I love the comments, Sue, and I love the support from you and Michael and everybody that's coming in here. So thanks for the Facebook stars, the support, the super chats. Appreciate it. But he can find a quarterback. He just couldn't draft one. But I will say that
that's good.
I am
I
of
like
the
that.
opinion that if Brock Osweiler had not jumped ship after the 2015 season, went to the Texans, if he'd have taken the same deal with the Broncos, I believe they would have got back into the playoffs in 2016. I think Simeon was an okay quarterback, but wasn't able to get him there. And I think Osweiler could at least got him that one other game down the stretch that could have got them into the playoffs.
What could have been? That's always a very interesting conversation too, right? Looking at what life was like, what it could have been like after Peyton Manning rode into that sunset. But let's remember, Peyton Manning certainly wasn't in a rush to decide if that was his true end. I mean, I know that he all went into it. We've all seen the videos, right? Talking to Bill Belichick, this is my last rodeo. Man, it's really hard for these guys to truly call it quits. Look no further than Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers. Bobby Vincent coming in here real quick saying, John Elway is why I am a Broncos fan. I absolutely love it. Andrew coming in here and just throwing a huge exclamation mark, a legend. And he absolutely is a legend. And speaking of those legends, you can hear all about that Baltimore Colts. That's right. For some of our youngins in this pod, I don't think they know about the Baltimore Colts. The Baltimore Colts originally drafted John Elway. Huge drama before the draft even got there. You'll get to learn all about Jack Elway, what those conversations were like this Friday with Thomas on the Legends of Mile High podcast. Todd coming in here saying, good evening, Luke, Thomas, and Dylan. I have to say what's up to my dude, Ernie Mays, saying what's up, John Elway, the greatest champion. Go Broncos country only. And Tom, for me, man, being a Colorado native, John Elway is what got me into watching football. I mean, John Elway, Terrell Davis, Zim. I mean, that whole 97, 98, those 2 years, I fell in love with the game of football. He's the Duke of Denver for a reason. I mean, I put it out there on my Twitter today at Luke Patterson LP. He put Denver, Colorado on the map. It was John Elway.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the Broncos, obviously, they'd been to a Super Bowl with the Orange Crush defense, but it had taken a long time for them to even get relevant. And then they were on that they went on that high and then they were swooning back down. And Elway is what put them over the hump. He was involved in 7 of 8 Super Bowls. And the reason he wasn't involved in the first one is because he was still in high school, right?
Right.
7 of the 8 Super Bowl appearances was
7.
John Elway either as a player or a GM.
Ironically so, 7 out of 8. I mean, I get
That's
goosebumps
right.
even hearing you say that too. So you're telling me, I mean, with the exception of one Super Bowl, John Elway has had his hands in all of them. I mean, I don't think that's something that people truly recognize. We know that he's had his hands in all 3 Super Bowl championships, but 7 out of the 8 Super Bowls that the Denver Broncos have been in, John Elway has been in as well, either as a quarterback or a general manager. That's tough to replicate, man. I don't know anyone else that's done it. I mean, Ozzie Newsome, Pro Football Hall of Famer, he's a tight end, right? He's Super Bowl champion as a executive with the Ravens, but I don't think Ozzie ever got that ring as a player.
No, because he was with the Browns. So they never made it to the Super Bowl.
Hard thing to do. John was beating him down.
That's
Tom
right.
Lockoff coming in here with a 199 Super, never beating us down, always bringing us up, saying John Elway has hit on free agency years ago, getting Peyton Manning. And Tom, I love that you brought this up, man, because I don't think without John Elway, I don't know that Peyton Manning comes here. I really don't. I think that Peyton has been on the record of saying that John was huge in getting him to come to the Denver Broncos. Different men, different players, same goal, be great.
Well, and that's the thing. I remember I think it was the Titans that were one of the, finalists for his services that year, right? I mean,
That's
he
right.
definitely had options.
Them in
But
San Francisco.
what sealed the deal was John Elway said, I retired a Super Bowl winner. I want to do the same thing for you. And he did. He went out and did it. He got him a Super Bowl.
Goosebumps.
I didn't hear what you said. Sorry about that.
Goosebumps. Just goosebumps, man. Yeah. I mean, like how often can you back those type of words up? Like, I rode off into the sunset. If you come here, you will too. And that happened. I mean, he was the architect, as you were getting ready to say. I mean, he was the architect of the Super Bowl 50 defense, the no-fly zone. He drafted Von Miller. I mean, for crying out loud, as much crap that as John Elway gets on Paxton Lynch, Trevor Siemian, some of these quarterbacks, Brock Osweiler, say what you want about him. That last Super Bowl championship from 2015 has John Elway's fingerprints all over that D.
Yeah, and think about it. I watched that. I was at Super Bowl 48. I saw the the disaster, happen in real time. And you got to give. I know people are thinking about Elway in the last few years and how it's been pretty bad trying to get a quarterback and get back to relevance. But think about this. He saw that Peyton Manning couldn't do it, with a magnificent offense. He had the best offense ever in the history of the NFL. 2013 couldn't get it done. In 2012 he couldn't get it done. Think about that debacle. It wasn't just Raheem Moore, right? It was Peyton Manning throwing interceptions. It was Champ Bailey getting burned. There was a whole bunch of stuff going on, but not being able to get that win when you got 2 special teams touchdowns, right? That was enough for John Elway to say, you know what? It is time to go back to the drawing board, and we're going to go out and we're going to get Aqib Talib. We're going to get TJ Ward. We're going to get Darian Stewart. We're going to build a defense that's worthy of going to the championship. And unfortunately, it was so good, it drug Peyton Manning to that championship because he was a shell of his former self when they went into those playoffs and that Super Bowl. I mean, his rating in that Super Bowl was 54. That was terrible. The defense carried him to the Super Bowl, but you got to give John Elway credit for that, right? He saw that Peyton Manning couldn't do it with the high-powered offense and slinging the ball. So he recreated the team into a different way. Got DeMarcus Ware, all those decisions
I'll
were
double
amazing.
down. How about
Yeah,
How about getting Gary Kubiak back? I
yeah,
mean, Gary
that
was
was it.
happy up there in Baltimore as the offensive coordinator for Harbaugh, making a playoff run with Joe Flacco. Right, it all comes full circle with these guys. Joe Flacco becoming a Bronco, Russell Wilson now a Bronco. It's funny how there's a twist of fate with all of these things that John Elway tends to touch, but finding the guy as head coach like Gary Kubiak and being able to bring him back and watching Gary Kubiak truly be masterful in the way that he handled that magical 2015 season. It's truly special. Keith coming in real quick saying, my favorite Elway moment, that's the helicopter. And then
Yeah,
John stands up and just shrugs his shoulders and runs and heads back to the huddle.
yeah.
The helicopter, man. Talk to me about that, Thomas. Where were you when
Oh,
John Elway's most famous, can I say it's his most famous play? Because The Drive is his most famous series.
yeah.
But I would say John Elway's most famous play of his entire football career
Yep.
was the helicopter.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny. I remember exactly where I was. I was sitting in a chair. Basically, there was a few other people, friends, family, kind of, there, but I was basically alone because I had witnessed all these other Super Bowl debacles. And I was like, all I wanted was for that win to happen. And I mean, I wasn't cheering wholeheartedly until John Mobley knocked down that fourth down pass. And then I knew they'd
Dude.
won, but I remember watching that and thinking after that helicopter, I was like, there's no way they're going to lose this now. They can't lose this game now because of that play. I mean, it was magical, but at the time it wasn't my favorite kind of play. Now looking back, I'm like, that was amazing. But I was so caught up in they got to pull this out that it was like, I don't know. It was the hardest Super Bowl for me to watch really until it was over. And then, the next year when they won, I was having a blast watching because, they got the monkey off their back. But for me, it was weird just trying to watch that game, hoping for the win and just like sweating bullets till the final minute. I don't know. It was tough. But yeah, looking back, that's one of my favorite plays of all time.
Iconic, that helicopter. For me, with the helicopter, man, watching his eyes go to where the first down marker was
Yep.
while he's scrambling around and all his old athleticism. Man, just never say die with John Elway. It gives me goosebumps just talking about. Phil McLaughlin coming in, another friend of the show. Thank you so much, Phil. Hopefully you're doing well. Evening, Thomas and Luke. John Elway may not have found him, but his reputation and friendship is what got us Peyton Manning. Hashtag Buckham, hashtag number 7. You're damn right, Phil. There was not a better salesman as a GM, as an NFL exec than John Elway. And I think that when you start to truly look at some of those names that you talked about, John bringing in, Aqib Talib, DeMarcus Ware, I mean, these are some big TJ Ward. These are some big name dogs that John Elway was able to wrangle here, either through free agency, through NFL trades. I mean, going out and swinging and missing in the draft, that happens to everybody. It doesn't just happen to John Elway, and it's going to happen again here in just a couple of weeks when you see teams ultimately reach for a quarterback, and that's what it's all about. If everybody had it figured out all the time, you would see one team with only one success. It's
Yeah.
trying to figure out, is this the right player for our team now, later, or ever? And that's something that's tough to do. I certainly think that John should get some heat for that, right? Especially not finding the guy, but it's hard to find the guy, Thomas. I'm convinced every year I found the guy 6 different times. I was high on the Mac Jones bus, folks. I don't think Mac Jones is as bad as people make him out to be. What the hell do I know? Bill Belichick's out there shopping him. The Denver Broncos, apparently one of those teams, Mac Jones. That's right. The Denver Broncos, one of those teams in a report that you can read at milehighhuddle.com talking about Mac Jones to Denver. I don't know, but it just shows truly how hard finding that quarterback in the draft is.
Well, and it's hard to win a Super Bowl too. I mean, people are giving John Elway crap because he didn't win another Super Bowl. In 10 years, he won a Super Bowl and went to 2. I mean,
And how many
that's
AFC West divisional titles? He
yeah,
ran
come
the
on.
AFC West. I mean,
Yeah,
before the Chiefs had this dominance,
yep,
John had it going on with Peyton
yep,
Manning in the AFC West. Before the Raiders had this beaten streak with the Broncos right now, I mean, John Elway's Broncos would just kick the living dog, you know
yep,
what, out of the Raiders. I mean, let's not forget John Elway's dominance, not only in this division, but in the NFL. I mean, Jesus, he was an NFL MVP, Thomas. This is just one of those accomplishments that made Seven what he was.
Well, and I'll tell you, as a GM, I mean, I'll talk about it as a quarterback all day long, but as a GM, he went and he fired John Fox after they had gone. I mean, they were averaging over 12 wins a season, and he knew that he wasn't going to get them over the top. He knew that. And to as a GM, you have to make those decisions. And he did. He went out and got Gary Kubiak, and Gary Kubiak got him over the top. And brought in Wade Phillips. That was a masterful decision when everybody else was kind of like, whoa, you can't fire a guy that he just went 12-4 or whatever it was, right? But he did, and that was the right decision. And that, even though we can bag on him about the draft, as a GM, he was running the show, the entire show, because there was, really for the most part, there wasn't ownership for half of that time, right? And to get one Super Bowl and go to two in a decade. I mean, you look at the Rams did it. Nobody's giving Les Snead crap for not going back already, or all the times he didn't make it.
Picks, right? F them
right?
picks, according to Les Snead.
It's like, what have you done for me lately? Well, I would take a Super Bowl win every decade, because that would mean the Broncos have 6 Super Bowl wins right now. So I'd take it every day of the week. So.
Yeah, 2 Super Bowls as a quarterback, an NFL MVP. I don't know how many Pro Bowls, Pro Football Hall of Famer who was inducted the class of 2004. I mean, John Elway, he's done it all. And he's done it in an interesting way, especially here in Colorado, that people have been able to track it. Just a little personal moment. Before I give you my Elway thing, let's get to Clayton. Evening, guys. Make sure you smash that like button and share. Thank you so much, Clayton. Appreciate you rocking with us here on MHI as we react to the Denver Broncos and John Elway amicably parting ways. John will always have a place with the Denver Broncos. It's just not going to be on the payroll this year, and it sounds weird. This has been the transition in the direction that they've been going, but Colorado's been able to witness John Elway and the evolution of John Elway, back from when he was a California surfer dude from Stanford, stepping into the Mile High City, to, retiring in a very tearful and sad way. And after the end of the 1998 season, saying, I could see it right now. Some people you graduate from high school, you graduate from college. I'm just graduating from pro football. And now you kind of see Seven graduating from being in the brass with the pro football of the Denver Broncos. And what I mean by being able to see him grow up, he's had his hands in so many things here in Colorado. There's this little thing a long time ago, kids, called the Arena Football League. And I know not too many people know what that is, right? But there was an Orange Crush team that John owned, and John truly got to hone his skills as a talent evaluator, got to learn the business a little bit of football, and became a huge success in the Arena Football League long before he ever touched down as the Denver Broncos front office brass.
Yeah, and that's what got him the job, really, because he learned how to run a team. That's how he became the GM, and that he credits that. And in fact, he actually says, that I learned a lot. He said he learned a lot. A lot of these people that think GMs are just talent evaluators, they're not. When he was at the Colorado Crush, he had to fire his friend, and he almost got in a fist fight with that guy in his office because he was firing his friend, and that was the right thing to do for the team. Maybe not as a friend, but that was the right thing to do for the team, because then he hired the right person that came in and took them to a Arena League championship. So, he learned a lot about that. It's not just about going out and looking at draft prospects. There's a lot to being a GM in football, and he credited that as helping him get over the hump.
Michaela coming in here saying, I do remember the Arena Football team. Yeah, at one point it was more successful than the Denver Broncos. And it was interesting to see Elway involved with something that wasn't the NFL. It was kind of his first thing. He's had tons of successful businesses, still does, here in Denver, including a great restaurant. He's had car dealerships. I'm not sure if he still does, but super popular in the state, super popular in whatever business he decides to go in. My personal John Elway experience has been a little bit different than most. I played against his son, Jack, in high school. And that
Okay.
was pretty fascinating because John was his coach and Jack played quarterback and linebacker. And Jack Elway was one of the best linebackers I've ever seen play. And it sounds bizarre. He was not a quarterback. He was very aggressive. He was very athletic, but he played at Cherry Creek. I played at Mullen. And that was kind of my first glimpse of John Elway, right? Like, oh man, there's John Elway. And we were historic rivals, Mullen and Cherry Creek. So we absolutely hated Cherry Creek. We couldn't stand Jack Elway, right? Just because he wasn't wearing our colors. But it was
Right.
interesting to see John be involved with high school football here in Colorado, something that I think Broncos country can get used to that idea because Peyton Manning, his son Marshall's going to be a quarterback here in the next 5 or 6 years. Be ready. I'm sure Peyton Manning's not just going to be sitting in the bleachers twiddling his thumbs.
Right.
Peyton's probably going to be coaching as well. So to be a high school kid looking across the sideline or shaking John's hand at the end of the game, that was pretty cool because
Yeah.
John's always been approachable. And I know there are tons of stories out there, and we always say on this show, don't meet your heroes. But John Elway is a damn good hero in
Yeah.
Colorado and member of Broncos country.
Yeah, and I'd like to, there's a comment in here. I can't remember who said it. They're talking about John Elway's career if he'd had Mike Shanahan the whole time or whatever. And it's
Right here, I
interesting
got you.
because if you look at, I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I do a lot of analytics. I went back and I adjusted every quarterback for era, right? So you can compare them across eras. John Elway was the only quarterback who actually got better as he aged than he was in his earlier career. And that has a lot to do with coaching, right? He had that one MVP season, was a pretty good year, but statistically speaking, after he when Vassell became the coach is when his career statistically took off. Now Reeves, he's a great coach. You know, he's a Hall of Fame coach in my mind, but he did not
Rest
utilize
in peace,
John
right?
Elway. That's right. He didn't utilize John Elway to his fullest. So when Vassell came in, and then of course Shanahan came in, that's when he had his best seasons of his career. And one of the only quarterbacks and the only Hall of Fame quarterback that didn't diminish as he got older. His career got better in the latter half. He had several 80th percentile seasons adjusted for era. So yeah, I mean, can you imagine what his career stats would have looked like? I mean, you're talking, people compare Marino and they say he's better and blah, blah. Had he had
No.
someone like Shanahan his entire career coaching him, his stats would have been out of this world.
Well, and that was, a lot of people don't remember the days of Mike and John kind of having a tumultuous end to their relationship. Obviously, you're a student of history, just like I am, and we're just a couple of history nerds, especially when it comes to the Broncos. But towards the end of Mike's tenure here, and towards the end of John's tenure with the Broncos as a quarterback, it was kind of being debated who's to truly get the credit, right? Kind of like Tom Brady and Bill Belichick. Should Mike Shanahan get the credit? Should John Elway get the credit? And then they're forgetting all the greats in between, right? Terrell Davis, that offensive line, stellar defense, Steve Atwater, Shannon Sharp, all the Hall of Famers that John Elway got to play with and share Super Bowl rings with. And I think that's an interesting chapter of Broncos history. Mike has been welcomed back within the last couple of seasons with open arms from the Denver Broncos, and that was not always the case. And it wasn't necessarily a John Elway thing. It was a trust thing. It was let's maneuver delicate waters kind of a thing. Look, John Elway is beloved in that building, and he will always have a place. You'll see John. We'll see John at training camp this year,
Yep.
Thomas. I'm saying it right now in Broncos country. You will too. John Elway will be out there at training camp, and it's great when you see the guys come back in 7. He may not be under contract with the Broncos, but he's not going anywhere. Guys, this is MHI. He's Thomas Hall. I'm Luke Patterson, joining and rocking with you for the next 30 minutes as we react to John Elway and the Denver Broncos amicably parting ways. Mike Kliss sat down with John Elway yesterday, and John said, quote, "I've enjoyed the relationship with the Broncos for a very long time. I told Greg Penner I'd be happy to be a resource for him and help in any way that I can. I just wanted the flexibility. They're in great hands over there. I still plan on being around to watch and be a resource for Greg or George if I can." Tom, John Elway is going to be 63 years old this summer. He's looking at a new chapter of his life as well. His children have kids. He's a grandfather. He's talked about flexibility a lot the last few years, and I think it's tough for us as fans to see Seven kind of riding away and getting a little bit of distance. He's not riding that far, right? I mean, Seven's always going to be welcome here in Broncos country. He's the Duke of Denver, for crying out loud.
Yeah. He's always going to be on the Ring of Fame. He's always going to be, there. His jersey's retired. You'll always be reminded of him as a Denver Bronco. So, even if he doesn't ever come back and do anything, it doesn't matter. His legacy's there. It will live on. And there's so many, so many memories to talk about. I'm like, where do I even start? But it's
the ultimate Bronco.
What's that?
He's the ultimate Bronco. As our guy Dom Harmio is coming in here, he's just saying, I mean, like, as we try to figure out, and how would you describe John Elway, Broncos country, as you're letting us know some of your favorite stories? I mean, Dom's saying it best, the ultimate Bronco. I've said it. He's put the Denver, Colorado on the map. I mean, he has changed things, not only for just the Broncos organization, for the state, for the league. I mean, John Elway has been involved in a lot of rule changes too, right? When you start to look at what his job was as an executive and as an ambassador for the brand, the league, the Pat Bowlen Trust. I mean, there's so much that John Elway's accomplished. I probably don't even know half of it. You know what I mean? We haven't even got to his career, and what he did at Stanford and some of those historic moments and some controversial moments still in history, if you will, with the band, right? And everything like that.
Yeah. Comeback win thwarted. Yep.
Yeah. It's absolutely crazy when you look at John Elway. And I guess I would describe it to Mile High Magic. Without John Elway, I mean, I don't know that Mile High Magic exists. I mean, he just number 7. I mean, that number for me, I don't see another number 7 on this planet other than John Elway.
Yeah. Well, he was born to be a quarterback. I mean, he really was. His arm is, I mean, you can't find a stronger arm in the NFL ever, really, in my opinion. The guy could throw the ball so incredibly hard, and he was accurate. There's stories about him as a kid, when his mom would talk about him being out with his friends throwing rocks at mailboxes. He was the only kid that always hit the mailbox, right? I mean, his arm was meant to be in the NFL. He's meant to be a quarterback, and he came in and he struggled. There was some times that he struggled, but the thing of it was, everybody knew if the game was on the line and you gave the ball back to John Elway, that he was going to take him down there and win the game. And that's the way he played. He always gave it his all. He was always out there. I mean, at one point he was the winningest quarterback in the NFL, had the most career come from behind victories of any quarterback, and game-saving drives of any quarterback. I mean, the guy was always there to win. And, he got a lot of flack early in his career because he went to the Super Bowl and lost, even though I still think they should have won that first Super Bowl. But he got a lot of flack for that, but he changed the way he played. He got a better coach, got a better team around him, and he left with 2 Super Bowl victories. So he should have had 3, actually.
Tom, you're a parent just like I am, and my daughter's just now getting into rec and competitive sports, and the wins are awesome, the losses are tough. And one thing that I consistently tell my kid is, look, honey, you actually learn a lot more from losing than you do from winning. I know it sucks. The goal is never to lose. But when you think about how much John Elway got his ass kicked and kept coming back for more, never lost the killer instinct. It made him even hungrier, made him even more aggressive. I mean, that is something that is truly rare. And that's what makes him one of the greatest of all time. That's why his name has been synonymous with Michael Jordan. And I don't care about how many titles. It's just one of these things. These guys do not want to lose. And a lot of John Elway's former teammates who are still currently in the media tell these same stories, whether it's at pool, whether it's at beer pong, gambling, whether it's working out, whether it's a race. It doesn't matter what it is. John Elway was extremely competitive and probably still is extremely competitive in everything he does, especially being a good businessman here in Colorado and in the United States. That's rare. That's so rare. Peyton Manning, same way. I mean, these guys, they got embarrassed at certain points in their career. But for John Elway to just come back and let it all be hung on the line, to not care what people say about him, I mean, Pat Bolin with this one's for John. I mean,
Yeah.
that's gives me goosebumps even thinking about. And I was thinking about that this whole show. We were planning the show, and I'm thinking, man, this one's for John. Pat said
Yep.
it best. Like
Yep.
John Elway, ladies and gentlemen. I don't need to say anything else.
And I'll tell you, I think him retiring when he did was wonderful, but at the same time, it wasn't one of those situations where you're like, yeah, it's time for him to retire, because he still could play the game at a very high level. I mean, he was still throwing the ball as hard, almost as hard as he was early in his career. He could still play.
Yeah.
He wanted to get out because he was tired of the grind. It took so long to recover, and he was just like, I can't do it anymore. But for
He
me,
would
it
have
was
been
like,
able to
man,
do it in 2023 and 2022, right?
yeah,
With this CBA and everything. And you see practice out there just like me at training camp, guys. They don't do anything at practice out
yeah,
there.
yeah,
All the water breaks and everything, which, by the way, will be interesting to see how Sean Payton does it. But you're exactly right, Tom. I mean, it was a different era and,
yep.
quite frankly, a different breed of man.
Yeah. Yeah, he got beat up, man. All the quarterbacks did back then. But that's the thing too. Like, you watch all these other quarterbacks as they got, like I said, they got older. Marino got injured, tore his Achilles, and he had a special shoe had to wear. And you saw his play diminish. Troy Aikman, same thing, concussions, his play diminished. But you didn't see that with Elway. And yeah, if you go look at the stats straight up on Pro Football Reference or whatever, and you see, oh, he didn't have that many yards. Well, yeah, he missed 4 games, actually almost 5, because of injury that year. He was on pace to have one of his best statistical careers in 1998 of his career. It was amazing. He still was a hell of a quarterback, and he just retired
John.
out on top.
So selfish of him to leave. What was he thinking? You know what I mean? How dare John Elway try to live a life outside of being the Broncos quarterback? Because there are those on the 98 squad, Thomas, surprisingly so, that say, three-peat, we always wonder if, what if John would have came back? And
There's
speaking of
what ifs.
Yeah, speaking of what ifs, I mean, what would we do without our good friend Michaela Israel?
Right.
A very generous $3 super, and her boy Cooper is watching as well. Coop, hopefully basketball is going well, buddy. I'm hearing great things, hearing that Cooper is taking that next step in his competitive journey too. And guys, if you have kids, get them involved in stuff, whether that's sports, music, art. Get them out there, get them involved, let them experience life, let them learn new ideas and new concepts. That's one of the coolest parts of being a parent. So huge shout out to Michaela Israel and Cooper. Gary Palmer, speaking of shout outs, it wouldn't be an MHI without GLP giving us a shout out here on Mile High Insiders. What's up, Gary? Saying, hey, Thomas and Luke, not coincidentally, John Elway is the main reason the Denver Broncos sold for so much. Holy cow. I've never thought about that, Thomas.
It's true.
Gary coming in here off the top rope. I mean, we like to give, and I've done it on Twitter before too, and you can go back and look it up at Luke Patterson LP. I've given John some hell over, what those rights would have been that he had been offered, and what it looks like for the Walton Penner ownership, who came in and shattered records, and that record will be beat after the Washington Commanders is sold to Jeff Bezos, which I think is going to happen. Just speculation. But man, John Elway, how much did he make the Denver Broncos in terms of dollars, Thomas?
Yeah.
Can you give me a dollar amount on that? Because 7 is still one of the most popular jerseys out here in Denver Broncos country, Broncos land. And that's another thing we haven't talked about, the Elwayisms. I am going to miss the Elwayisms. When you get John to the press conference, and John is one of the smartest human beings I've ever talked to in my life. I told you about being a high school kid, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, competing against his son. John knows everybody, and John's not too big for anybody. I had just started out covering the Broncos with another publication, and it was just me and him on an elevator one day, and it was just, oh, hey, Luke. And I'm like, hey, Luke, you know who I am? You've made my life, John. But that's who John is, man. I mean, John is so self-aware. I am going to miss some of those little welcome to Bronco land. I'm going to miss the Case Keesums. I'm going to miss some of those great pieces of gold that John Elway has given us over the years, other than the actual gold. And I don't know if you know this, Tom. Do you know any of John Elway's nicknames? You know what some of his friends and teammates have called him before?
I don't know all of them. I mean, the Duke is obviously one.
Duke's in there.
My
favorite, Elwood. after the Blues Brothers. A lot of his friends and family, because he's so cool, man. I mean,
Yeah.
that's another thing about John, too. He's just a cool guy. He's a guy that people want to be around. He's a guy that, you know, guys want to be around. He's the ultimate fella. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? You can have a cold pop with John, and maybe that's gotten him in trouble a couple of times, but hell, it's the
Whatever.
American way. You know, like, it's just John Elway, man. He's such a cool customer. He's a cool cat, and I wish him well. I know you do too. He's not going anywhere, folks. This is going to be a little odd, right? Life after Elway, but we've been there before with the Denver Broncos. We'll see how it comes full circle.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there was a time where, between 98 and 2011 where he really wasn't part of the Broncos. So,
Yep,
there are times, but the problem is the success that they had came with him, whether he was the GM or the quarterback. So it is a little bit different. I hope they can find success without him. I was kind of hoping that he would somehow get his way into the ownership group so he kind of stick around, but
me too.
things change. You got to move on. And, we always can just look back and say he was for a period of time, he was the best quarterback and the best GM for a period
Wow,
of time.
that's
I
pretty
think,
impressive.
those first few years when he leading up to that Super Bowl 2015, he could have been easily executive of the year at any point in that time. Brought in Peyton Manning, like we talked about, all those other players, and I think him bringing in DeMarcus Ware. If you remember, they were going to get Jared Allen, and the DeMarcus Ware got cut, and he's like, "Okay, no, we're getting in DeMarcus Ware." But I'll tell you, DeMarcus Ware wasn't just bringing him; it wasn't just beneficial for the team and because of his ability to play the game. He changed Von Miller around and made him who he was. And without that, I don't think they would have won 2015. I don't
Hmm,
think they'd have won the Super Bowl had Von
you're
Miller not
right.
changed where he was going because of DeMarcus Ware. That was a shrewd move. I mean, anybody would have jumped on DeMarcus Ware. Don't get me wrong; they would have tried to bring him, but he got him into Denver, and and that was huge for the team, huge for the winning the Super Bowl, but huge for Von Miller. I mean, I don't think
Oh,
they would have won.
it changed his life. It
Yep.
changed Vaughn, and Vaughn talks about it frequently to this day. I mean, Vaughn talks about, picking DeMarcus's brain on more than just football. What's it like to be a husband? What's it like to be a dad?
Yep.
What's it like to, be retired? What's it like to all these things? I mean, John Elway has helped be a huge influential aspect in being just a man, not only a player, not only a coach on the high school realm, not only an executive. John has truly changed lives. And if you go back to it too, and you look at John Elway, and for those who say John selfish, I like to point back immediately to the first Super Bowl run. How selfish was John when he reworked his deal? And got Neil Smith here from the Kansas City Chiefs, and got to see some of that success, got to keep some Broncos together. How selfish was John when he got on the Harley and went to Sturgis, in 97 or 98, to go get Zim and tell him we're coming back.
Yep.
I mean, John was instrumental in so much. And David coming in here with a $5 super, and I'm glad David has taken us in this direction. Pat Bolin loved John Elway and gave him the opportunity to be the GM.
Yep.
And you're 100% right, David. And maybe there's something to be said for that. John, I like to think that Mr. B is smiling from heaven right now, right? And what John Elway has done for the franchise as a whole, both while Mr. Bolin was alive and since he has passed away. I think he would be extremely proud of John Elway and everything that he's accomplished. And those two were quite the pair. And of course, Mike Shanahan's name is always in there too. One thing you could say about Pat Bolin definitively, you could say a lot of things definitively about Pat. He loved John Elway.
Yeah. Well, he loved the Denver Broncos. That's his first love. He loved the Denver Broncos, and he knew that John Elway loved the Denver Broncos too and loved to win, and that's why he brought him in. It wasn't just because they were friends. He knew that John Elway had what it takes to be successful, right? And he knew that's the thing. When I said when they sold the team, I was like, I hope that they get somebody that can love the team the way Pat Bolin did, because it does take love to make these these teams win. You can't just be a shrewd businessman. You have to put your heart and soul into it. And Pat Bolin, it goes John Elway number one, Pat Bolin number two for me, the best Broncos of all time. And
Mm.
that love for the Broncos led him to John Elway to right the ship, because it was a debacle with Josh McDaniels. The Broncos were in dire straits at that point. John Elway came in to right the ship because he was a familiar face. He loved the Broncos and he would do anything to win. And then he brought in John Fox to kind of, bring back the right way of doing things. And then he realized that, like I said, that wasn't enough to cut it. So he went out and
Let's get the band back together.
Right? But he was willing to do what it took. And you can
Yeah.
say you can say over and over again, he was terrible at getting a quarterback. He had some bad drafts, but he wanted to win no matter what, whether it was on the field or in that owner's box, watching the game from up above. He wanted to win, and that's really what Bolin saw in him. It wasn't just friendship.
Yeah, it wasn't just friendship. It was, man, I don't want to quite call it like father son because, of course, we know what Jack meant to John, and you'll get into that a little bit. And Jack Elway's role, and who was Jack Elway exactly? You'll get into all of that on your edition of Friday's Legends of Mild High. Guys, be sure to head on over to Twitter and follow Thomas at Thomas Hall NFL. Yours truly at Luke Patterson LP. Mike S coming in here, one of our good friends. Bronco fans are the best fans from all over the world. I completely agree with you, Mike. And John Elway, Pat Bolin, Mike Shanahan, these are the guys that have really kicked things off for a lot of fans of the orange and blue. And it's cool whenever the fellows, Chad and Zach, have one of our friends, one of our supporters on, and the first question Chad loves to ask, and it's one of my favorite to listen to: what got you into watching Broncos football? And usually those answers are mom and dad watching John Elway on the couch. Mom and dad watching and hanging out with uncle, watching Terrell Davis rush for 2000. I mean, all these sorts of things. And I get nostalgic about it too, man. And I was so spoiled as a little kid watching John Elway and not appreciating him for what he truly was as a quarterback. I damn sure got to appreciate him as a GM. And what I'll always be just a little jealous of, I didn't cover the Broncos really when the last Super Bowl run was happening. I was still just a fan on the sidelines, man. Yeah. So I didn't really get to cover John, but I've experienced and witnessed and been around so many cool things. And one of my cooler moments, I guess in John's final years was scouting next to him. I mean, whether that be at the Senior Bowl, the Shrine Bowl, the Broncos local pro day, actual pro days. I mean, it's pretty cool when you see John Elway out there who, say what you want about him in quarterbacks, he could evaluate talent, and he got that from his dad, Jack Elway.
Absolutely. Yeah, and he could. There's a lot of, I think he got away from what he really was good at. I think what happened, he started to take risks on players with injuries and things like that, as he went along. But yeah, I mean, he brought in some great players in the draft. I mean, Justin Simmons is a good player. He got some later round picks. He just missed on a quarterback. And that was that, like I said early, Brock Osweiler running away to Houston caused him to jump at Paxton Lynch. And that's the main key that really started this whole kind of dive into mediocrity for the Broncos, was being forced to draft Paxton Lynch and not finding an actual replacement. You can say, yeah, well, Osweiler, you shouldn't have drafted him to begin with or whatever. I mean, that's fine. But that was kind of the catalyst for the downfall. And I think he started to hopefully turn it around. But, brought in George Payton, and that's the end of it. So we won't ever get to see kind of how he bounces back, how he was able to bounce back from it, because he's riding off into the sunset again, so to speak.
Yeah, it's a true changing of the guard, right? When you're looking at the new Broncos ownership, you're looking at George Payton, who John Elway got to pick his replacement. That's very rare. You don't see that a lot of times. I'm a George Payton fan. I appreciate and respect a lot of what he's doing. Doesn't mean I agree with everything he's doing, but I don't have a better name who I would like to see in here right now. Sean Payton coming to the Denver Broncos, again, part of that changing of the guard, and it's okay for change to happen. Now, that's tough for me a lot of times, Thomas. I'm very much stuck in my groove. I like consistency, and when life throws me a wrench, I'm trying to be more adaptive, especially the older I get. I'm trying to be able to overcome things a little bit more. I mean, this is just a natural progression in life. And again, John's going to be 63 this summer. He still has a lot that he wants to accomplish in his life. And he told Mike Kliss, quote, "I'll still be around as a resource. I've been with the Denver Broncos for so long that it was nice to have some sort of connection, which is what I wanted. I didn't want an obligation. I'm getting a little older. I want to be able to do some things I haven't done. I'm ready to have a flexible schedule. If there's something I can help with, I'll do that.
Yeah.
And John's never going to be told no when he asks to come by. Hell, John doesn't need to ask to come by. Give John the keys to the building and John can do whatever the hell he wants, as far as I'm concerned. And the Broncos have got themselves a real one with John and everything that he's accomplished. He is the Denver Broncos. I feel 100% vindicated in saying that. I don't think without one key piece, without a Pat Bowlen, you don't have a John Elway. Without a John Elway, you don't have a Pat Bowlen and the success that they've had. And Mike Shanahan, for all that matters too. I mean, these guys had something so special, and not always does the star and moon align for these things to hit it. And you said it to start our show. Winning a Super Bowl is hard. It's super hard to do. Hence the name, right? Super Bowl. But to look at John Elway get kicked in the mouth so many times and come back for more, and then ultimately leave smiling with that John Elway smile, man, that makes me feel good.
Yeah. Well, and talking about the stars align, I mean, that 1998 team, the second of the two Super Bowls there back to back, that team is one of the best teams that ever took the field. They had the best owner in the league. They had a great coach. They had a great quarterback, and they had, Terrell Davis, the greatest playoff running back of all time. They had a great offensive line. They had a good defense. I mean, all that came together. That was one of the best teams. I mean, you can put others in front of them, and I wouldn't cry about it, but it's up there. It's one of the better teams that ever came down, in the NFL world. So, that the aligning of all that together was amazing. And to have it happen that way, to have back-to-back championships at the end of John Elway's career after he faltered those 3 times before, really kind of added a more, brilliance to the whole thing, right? Because everybody thought that they were going to lose the first one, right? Everybody thought there's no way they're going to beat the Packers, and they ended up winning it, and they won it again, and then he left. And that there's just a little bit more shine to it. It would have been different had he came in and not lost those, and then he won one and called it quits. But man, to struggle through that for his career, to finally do it, to me, it's a little bit more of a shining moment than some of the other teams that have won Super Bowls.
Yeah, and it's an example. I think people should also really look at that and use that as some motivation. I mean, the greats all have failed before, folks. Otherwise, they wouldn't be greats. And we can go look at Tom Brady. You could change the sport altogether. Look at Kobe Bryant, rest in peace. I mean, look at some of the best that have ever done it. And you're going to see that they stumbled along the way, and stumbling and losing and having painful times actually inspired growth. And it's one of those metaphors I like to use, especially being an old firefighter, right? And coming from a firefighter family. Wildfires, I mean, forests are designed to burn. It doesn't mean that you should go throw your lit cigarette out, but usually after those forests burn, what happens? That soil's rich. Plants, trees, all kinds of life comes from that. Same thing with failure, guys. And we can't, as human beings, be afraid to fail, because we can ultimately redeem ourselves, right? We can get some redemption, and we can hopefully ride off into the sunset as well. Jesse coming in here saying John has had some very valid reasoning. Peyton's ability. Look, John Elway and George Payton, I'm excited about that. And for John to leave the place better than where he found it is very rare. You talked about Josh McDaniels and what he did to this franchise. John came in and had to work from the ground up. Doesn't mean he didn't have help. I think sometimes we forget some of the folks that George Payton is always naming. That's one of my favorite things after the draft. George will sit up there, Thomas, as you know, for about 10 minutes and just spit out names of guys and gals that we've never even heard of. And that means so much for strong leadership. And John was the same way, super loyal with a lot of his friends, a lot of his family, and sometimes that loyalty meant tough decisions, as you talked about earlier with the crush. I mean, Gary Kubiak and John Elway haven't always seen eye to eye. Peyton Manning and John Elway haven't always seen eye to eye. That's okay. It's okay to disagree with each other and then ultimately come back and be full circle. That's the sign of greatness. That's the sign of competitiveness, and I absolutely love it, Tom. We don't agree on everything on this show, but
That's
we
right.
want to constantly make things better and we want to push each other. And that's ultimately what your friends do, right? Your friends don't just sit there and tell you everything that you need to hear. They tell you the really brutal, honest truth sometimes. And John got that from some friends, and he was also that way towards some of his other buddies too. And I think what you look at is a legacy that is just completely astonishing to me
Yep.
and so impressive. I'm impressed with the wins, don't get me wrong, but it's the losses. To see the way he came back after getting his ass kicked that much, that often, makes winning so much sweeter.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I remember I watched all the Super Bowls except for, 77. So I was too young. But watching that San Francisco 49ers Super Bowl where they just got crushed, that felt like to me like that's it for the Broncos,
Ouch.
right? That it was a horrible, horrible experience. Yet they, took them a little while, but they got back there and won it all. So, like you said, it's just a little bit sweeter. They learn from all those mistakes, and then that was the thing about Elway. He could have just been a stuck up brat and said, whatever, I'm just going to do whatever I want and throw however I want. But he changed his game a little bit. He worked in the West Coast offense better. And it just, he was able to evolve his game a little bit. And that's a sign of learning.
You talk about learning. I mean, it could be argued he was that brat coming into the
Sure.
NFL. And as you talk about that on your show on Friday morning, and I know you'll get to it. I mean, a lot of guys are looking at him sideways like, who is this kid to come in and say he's not going to play for a franchise? I mean, you see some of those vibrations still happening today. I mean, you're looking at the D lineman, right, from Georgia right now saying, I'm not going to go to any top 10, anybody that's not a top 10 suitor in the NFL draft. I'm not doing a pro visit.
Right.
Really? Is that the smartest of moves? But when you look at it, John Elway was ultimately the one to say, you know what, I'm going to do things my way. And
Yeah.
I could respect that. I could appreciate that. It takes a lot of courage and a lot of stones to come out and do something that everyone's telling you not to do. Man, John did it his way,
Yeah.
baby, and I respect the hell out of that for the wins and the losses.
And it wasn't just because he was a brat about it. It was the right thing to do. If you look back at why he
The
did
Colts
it,
were, yeah,
why he did
the
it, it
Colts.
was, I mean, there was a lot of good reasoning for why he didn't want it, because both he and his father knew he would not be as successful there as he would have been elsewhere. And that was smart. I mean, just because you don't want to go somewhere doesn't mean that you're just, a spoiled brat and you want your way. There was a calculated move in there,
Yeah.
and there was reasons for doing it, and that's why he ended up in Denver.
Double-edged sword, right? You do something that people aren't telling you to do, and then you become a GM and you're like, well, remember that decision everyone said I shouldn't do? That worked out pretty okay for me, right? Good
Yeah.
draft Paxton Lynch. I mean, it is that double-edged sword. And I mean, John Elway, man, we could do a whole, I'm so pleased to hear that you're doing the draft trade on Friday morning. I'm going to be tuning into that show. It's one of my favorite 30 for 30s, Elway to Marino.
Yep.
And I wish one day I'm going to just bid and blow my entire savings account. I hope my wife's not listening on trying to get that notepad from John's agent, who was also agents with Dan and some of the other quarterbacks and Kelly too, right? I mean, John's agent from that 83 draft saved the notepads, Tom, as you know, man. And I wish I could go back and
Yeah.
just grab those notepads and keep them forever and ever. But speaking of keeping forever and ever, guys, this podcast is going to be available forever and ever wherever you get your podcast, whether that be Spotify, Apple, iTunes, Twitter, YouTube, Twitch, all of our great platforms. Feel free to give us a listen and let us know how we did. We take those reviews really seriously, and we appreciate everybody joining us tonight and sharing your John Elway stories. I mean, I'm all nostalgic. I'm feeling all warm and fuzzy right now
Yeah.
about 7. And of course, we reacting to the news that John Elway and the Denver Broncos amicably parting ways. And Tom, it's such a fun show, man. We have got a real special thing going here on MHI. I can't wait to see where things go here in just a few weeks with the NFL draft. Stay tuned to Mile High Huddle. We've got a lot of fun, exciting news coming out of the NFL draft here in just a few weeks. So stay tuned.
Yeah, thank you. This has been fun. I mean, I love reminiscing about the Broncos and going back and talking about the olden days. So this was fun, and man, you know, d- just remember John Elway as a winner. don't worry about his drafting and all that nonsense. He was a winner. Remember him as a winner because that's what he was.
And that's what he is. I mean, if you if you want to get close to John, I'm gonna say this too because I've actually done it. Go to a steakhouse, and you never know who you're going to see around there. You've got some old dogs constantly around, some old teammates. John's usually around the city, which is pretty cool. He loves the Mile High, and he's the Duke of Denver. You could find him on a scooter near you, maybe. I mean, one of my favorite Elwayisms, right? Driving down in downtown Denver in that Segway. And I mean, John, those moments aren't going anywhere. We're going to keep them going. We're going to keep the TMZ moments alive and well, if you will, with John Elway. But guys, this was a wrap for MHI tonight. It was a lot of fun. You can be sure to get at Thomas on Friday and Saturday. You've got Legends of Mile High on Friday morning, and then you've got the Orange and Blue View with Thomas and Ron White on Saturday at 6 p.m. Mountain. Do not miss it. One of the coolest things about Mile High Huddle, we've got a show every single day of the week. And speaking of that, the boys, Chad and Zach, will be back tomorrow at 6 p.m. Mountain. Not sure if Broncos for Breakfast is going on tomorrow morning or not, just because we're trying to get our last-minute vacation time in here, Tom, before the NFL draft. I know some people had spring break a couple weeks ago. I'm still trying to get to mine here in a couple weeks, but don't worry. Here at Mile High Huddle, we have got you covered. And Tom, what a fun show, man. I always appreciate these.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone that joined in the chat and supported us. Your support means a lot, a great deal. So thank you very much. And, let's have one for the good old number 7 tonight.
This one's for John, right? Can we all go put on our 97, 98, 2015 Game of Americas right now on NFL Network and start crying? Because that's what I'm ready to do. Guys, it's been a fun show. For Tom, I'm Luke saying Broncos country, this is the way.
This is the way.